theyeshiva.net.
The line starts with Sharsha. We're holding the end of the line, V'lachein b'chanukas habeis hamikdash. It's like 10, 15 lines from the bottom. You see, Sharsha, the line starts with Sharsha. The end of the line, V'lachein b'chanukas habeis hamikdash. The last point the Balatanya made in this mimer was that Malchus, true leadership, is one of those things that is in the realm of what he associated with the mitzvah of shikha, that the Gemara says, Chazal say, Kol haroidef acher hakaved bereich mimeno, v'kol habereich min hakaved bereich acherav. Haroidef acherav. Somebody who pursues kaved, honor, glory, it runs away from him, and conversely. The definition of real malchus, for the person to be able to be worthy of true leadership, of true royalty, by definition, if the person is so eager for it, it will ultimately, it's human, it's normal, it's not, people want it, but that malchus will be flawed. Or put it this way, there'll be a lot of challenges to overcome in terms of the person growing into the position. And that's why you see that throughout history, the greatest leaders were reluctant. It was often imposed upon them more by force than by will. The first example, of course, was Moshe Rabbeinu, who tried every way to avoid it, which at first glance is strange. You're getting here an opportunity of a lifetime from a physical level, from a spiritual level. I mean, the creator of the world. So it's not elections of a state or a city or a country. And what the position is. And Hashem is telling you to do it, and you're a tzaddik, how do you refuse? And the answer is because that was his way of doing the mitzvah. If it's like shikha, the not wanting it is the only way that you can ultimately access it, you can ultimately embrace it. Because it's rooted in that place in the soul that we call atik, that is beyond the conscious. So if the person is preparing for it and wanting it and their whole life, I'm going into that position, ultimately it's not that ultimate malchus, it's not that real malchus. And David HaMelech himself, as we will see later in the Maimer, he himself was the last choice. He didn't expect it, he didn't want it, he didn't think he's worthy of it. When Shmuel Hanavi came to coronate one of the children of that family, nobody even thought there would be David. The Tanakh says there were another 7 boys, would have been one of the other 7. There was nobody else, so they brought out David. And it's at his own consciousness himself, as he brought from Tehillim. David HaMelech says, Im loy gava libi, im loy shivisi nafshi, v'doimamti nafshi kegamol alei imay, as he explained what type of soul he had. And as a result of that, he can actually experience the gift and the position and the responsibility and the privilege of what we call malchus.
So what about the fact that malchus goes to a son, and a son knows he can't be the melech, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So the first of the lineage, I understand, but once it goes to a son,
it's already it's part of the education.
right?
It's part of the education.
Unless that's exactly what he's trying to be Morishan. That same power of the original Malchus that the first progenitor.
Right. Yeah. In other words, the real Iyar will usually have at least something similar to the father in that sense as well.
And you see, and many times, he didn't pursue a straight line of Danas. David had to have a whole something in place to make sure who's going to be at the Malchus. It should be Shlomo.
Right, because there wasn't a Ben Yachid, yeah. Wasn't a Ben Yachid. Yeah. So now he continues. And therefore, based on everything that was explained, Chanukas HaBeis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was built and dedicated, and this is the emphasis here is Beis HaMikdash, the home of the Mikdash, Shenimshech l'sham mibchinas Makiv, demakiv, commotion is boyer la'el. The bias, the physical home, we explained, is a physical manifestation, not of the pnimi, which is represented by food, not even the makiv hakarov, represented by garments, but what he's calling the makiv harachak, or the makiv limakiv. That is what comes out in the home. So the Beis HaMikdash, which acts as the makiv of makiv shulam mailam in aratzen, which is beyond desire, beyond conscious will and desire, it's a makif even legabe ratzon. Ratzon legabe pnimi is already a makif. And this is leaving legabe ratzon, it's a makif. So he says, b'chinas keser, it's beyond ratzon, beyond keser. Ve'ein shayich sham simcha klal. And therefore, generally, you wouldn't think that joy could be connected to that place. K'may b'mitzvahs, for example, by mitzvahs, shu b'ratzon ha'adam, a mitzvah which is fulfilled with the desire and the passion of a person. The ksiv, the pasuk says in Parshas Kisav, Tachas asher lo yavadetas Hashem Elokecha. B'simcha chuli, the pasuk says, B'simcha of tuv levav meiroiv koil. You haven't served Hashem with simcha of tuv levav. So some of the Mefarshim, like the Rambam and Hilchas Lulav and the Arizal, explain the meaning of the pasuk is that you may have done everything, but you didn't do it with a simcha. You weren't interested. There was no passion. There was no real desire. There was no enthusiasm. On the contrary, we want that the service, the relationship should be one with joy, with a geschmack, with a ratzon, with a will. That's the fuel, the oxygen, the gas that fuels the mitzvah. So over there, it could be simcha. I plan it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm anticipating it. It's the nature of the relationship, the level of the relationship that can be accompanied with a sense of joy, because there is a ratzon there, there's a passion there. However, and that's why we say Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvaysav. Before you do a mitzvah, the Chazal instituted to make a bracha and say Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvaysav. He sanctified us, or he betrothed us. Kedishanu was from the word kedushin, through the mitzvah. The source, the root of every mitzvah that we perform is Hashem's ratzon alien. That's what a mitzvah is. And therefore it becomes aligned with a person's ratzon, and it's something that can be performed with that sense of simcha, which comes with ratzon, with desire, with volition, with a conscious passion, anticipation, and eagerness and enthusiasm.
Why does simcha correlate?
Well, if there's ratzon, there could be a simcha. In other words, I want it. I want this. I'm looking forward to it. When we're dealing with the concept of a Chanukas HaBeis Chaima, of a dedication of celebrating a new home that was built, a Beis Chaima, he says, a house with a Chaima made of stones, and the walls are made of stones, which is P'chinas Daimim. Avonim, stones, are the lowest in the hierarchy of creation, what we call doimim, the lifeless, the silent, like David HaMelech said, Im lo shivisi v'doimamti, sheshar shem l'mayla min haratzin k'moshen izbar l'el. That which comes down in the lowest, it comes down into doimim because it's rooted in a place beyond ratzin. L'chayda, ostensibly, ain't shayach klal simcha. Over there, the reality, the experience of simcha doesn't relate there. Because simcha, you would think, can only be, not you would think, simcha can only be on something that I'm experiencing. What is simcha? Simcha is an experience of joy. So it has to be something that is manifested in my experience, in my consciousness. But when we're dealing with that which we spoke about, you can't be excited to be Mekayim mitzvahs shikha, for example. I'll be besimcha and make a bracha, shekedeshanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu lasas mitzvahs shikha. If you make a bracha, you'll never be doing the mitzvah. It's a type of mitzvah that's coming from a place that is deeper than a conscious experience, from a place of forgetfulness, from a superconscious space, from pnimi yisakes. In Hashem kevayachal, it's rooted in a place that's deeper than the ratzon that can be manifested and experienced. So over there, the experience of simcha is inapplicable, is not applicable. What is simcha? Simcha is, I'm excited, I'm happy, I'm joyous. And that's why they had to bring in, they had to communicate, to be mamshech, to draw into that place, to that realm, Simcha. After the parentheses, Vizel Mizmor Shir Chanukas Habayis. That's the deeper meaning behind this kapitel in Tehillim, on which the Maimer began, with this pasuk from Tehillim, kapitel Lamed. Mizmor, it's a song, a ballad, Shir, a song of Chanukas Habayis, of the dedication of the home, LeDavid, Lahamshich Bechanukas Habayis B'china Simcha, to bring in Simcha into the Chanukah, into the dedication, into the structure, the construction, and the complete of the destruction of the home. And that's the deeper reason why we make a Mishta feast and a Simcha joy. When there's a moving into a new Chanukas Habayis, like he started the Maimah Lahavin Atam Sha'osin Mishta v'Simcha b'Chanukas Habayis, and he started to say that there's three dimensions: there's Mazal, and there's Levushim, and there's Batan, there's food, there's garments, and there's home. And he went off on the whole discussion of these three things. So now he's coming back. Now we can understand why by a Chanukas Habayis there's a special minhag, a special tradition to make a Mishta v'Simcha by Chanukas Habayis dafka. V'zel gamkein inyan Mizmor Shir. That's why in this kapitel Tehillim it says Mizmor and Shir. Shehunira keifalinyan. It seems like redundant. K'moshe kasav ba'alshich, as the Alshich says that Mizmor Shir. It seems like redundant. There's many kapitels Tehillim that start Mizmor LeDavid. You have a kapitel starts Shir. Here you have Mizmor and Shir. So there's a few kapitels like that, and you have to understand what's the redundancy. Mizmor is a song, like Zemer, Zmiris, right? Psuke de Zimra. And Shir is a song, like Az Yashir, Shira is a song. Vahainu, but now we can understand. Vahainu al derech hanal b'maisa de chasedech. It's similar to what we learned before from the Tosefta Maseches Peah Perek Gimel. The maisa de chasedech, the story of the pious person who forgot a sheaf of grain in his field, and when he discovered it, he told his son to bring a special offering in the Beis HaMikdash, an ox for an oil, an ox for an shlam, and his son said, why? And what did he answer? He said, in response to his son's question, why did this mitzvah generate more joy in you than any other mitzvah? So what did he say? That all mitzvahs Hashem gave us to do lidatenu, with our das, and zu shaloi lidatenu, this without our das, because if we would have done it with our das, with our ratzon, loy basa mitzvah zuli yadenu, this mitzvah could have never come to us. This is the quote from Tosefta earlier. So he now says, just like in that story, the son said, Mari, so mitzvah zu mikol mitzvah schuli, etc. Ukamoshn is bar la'el, so v'kol shekein b'chanukas beis hamikdash, shezau klalus b'chinazu. Certainly when it wasn't just an individual mitzvah of shikha, but the whole bias of the Beis HaMikdash is being dedicated, which and represents this very idea, this very b'china, this very dimension of makif, lemakif. So it's not only a mizmor, it's a mizmor shir. In other words, there is even a deeper level of mizmor shir because of its greatness, and on the other hand, it needs more of hamshach of simcha. V'zehu, in the previous parentheses, I skipped right before this. The line started in Tzrachim. There was also parentheses. I just didn't want to interrupt the flow, but take a look there. V'ayin masher kasavnu al pasuk she'afta mayim b'sasan. It's connected to the Maimer in Sukkot on she'afta mayim b'sasan. Shelefi she'nisach hamayim hu b'china shelemaylim b'chinas nisach hayayin. Shayayin mesameach chuli al kein tzarich lechabrei in b'chinas simcha. V'zeu inyanu she'afta mayim dafke b'sasan. It's an interesting thing that in the Beis HaMikdash, they used to pour wine every single day. Right? When we did the Karbonos Tzibur, we always talk about B'yom HaShabbos, Shnei Kvasim, Neshana Tmimim, Shnei Yisraelim, Selas Mincha B'Lo B'Shemen, V'Niskoi. Every carbon Tzibur, a communal offering came, and sometimes individuals, depends which ones, came with a wine libation. The Kohen also poured, there was a cup and he poured wine onto the altar. This was part of the experience. On Sukkot, there was a separate mitzvah called Nisuch Hamayim. Every morning, when they were makar the Tamar Shel Shachar, they together with the wine, they also poured a goblet of water. And they went and they used to draw the water in the early dawn, from the Shiloyach spring, and bring it up to the Beis HaMikdash and pour it. And in fact, For this, the pasuk says, "Usha'aftem mayim b'sasan." You should draw water with joy, and the whole reality of Simchas, what we call Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, revolved around the drawing of the water. The Simcha, it's also interesting, it's called Beis. Now we can understand why it's called Beis. Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, the Simcha that's connected to the drawing of the water. And the whole night they used to dance in preparation for it, to the point that Chazal tell us in Maseches Sukkah, Mish lo yira Simchas Beis HaShe'eva lo yira Simcha meyamav. And what was it all connected to? Pouring water. Now, ask a regular person, what's more joyous, wine or water? What makes people more happy? You don't hear people say, I'm really stressed out, I'm going to go drink a cup of water. To cheer me up. On the contrary, wine, and it's not just by humans. The pasuk says, Yayin misameach. It's a pasuk in Shoftim, in Sefer Shoftim. Yayin misameach elikim va'anoshim. The wine, the beverage of wine brings joy. That's what the pasuk says, to God and to people, however you want to explain what it means, misameach elikim. But you see by Sukkos, that the focus of Simcha revolved around the Mayim, which after Mayim B'sos. And this became the greatest Simcha, even a regular Simcha. So it's a very similar thing. Yayin on its own is connected to Simcha. Mayim on its own doesn't seem connected to Simcha at all. It's like just a staple of life. It's a cup of water. You drink a cup of water, you don't start dancing. There was the special avodah on Sukkos to bring Simcha into the Nisach HaMayim. Similar to the idea he's saying here, that in a bias regularly there's no Simcha. There was a special inyan of Mizmor, Shir, Chanukas Abayis to bring Simcha into the bias. When you make a Chanukas Abayis, a special focus on Simcha, as will be explained.
There's a little bit of a structural problem. What I mean by that is, we think of Simcha's Beis Yoel Simcha because Sukkah is the holiday, the whole Yom Tov of Simcha, sometimes it's Simcha Yisera. So now we're saying the real Simcha is when there is no Simcha. Because then, intrinsically there would not be Simcha based on English, it's a bias. So therefore David gave it the most Simcha of all. So whether or not there's no Simcha, you always have Simcha. Either because it's there as part of the nature of the day, or because we have to add it because it's lacking. We don't say that Shabbos, because unlike Shabbos, Yontif, Shabbos doesn't have Simcha, Shabbos not Batal Avelos. We don't say Shabbos, okay, we add Simcha because Shabbos doesn't have Simcha. I mean, you sort of can't win. When if you don't have Simcha, then you do have Simcha, because you don't have it.
It's a good question.
I don't understand the concrete after that big thing that the Beis HaMikdash had walls of stone and it doesn't bring Simcha. Nobody gets especially excited about stone, but as they say, the sum total is much more than the total of the parts. Nobody moved into a new house. That's a special feeling. I don't understand it.
You see, when people move into a new house, they feel good. They're excited. There's Simcha.
And nobody says, it's just planks of wood there,
It's not just planks of water or rocks. It's the summation of it all. It's not two rocks together. It's a whole home. Okay, good question. Good questions. Let's continue a little more inside.
Does the Monsey say double lesson because it's a simcha just to have a benefit?
I have to look up what the Alshich answers. He's just referencing the Alshich as a source for the question why it says Mizmor Shir twice.
I thought the Rav said that because it's a simcha for having a regular house.
So the Balatanya is answering that just like by Shikha, the son tells the father, Mara Isalismayach Besimchas Mitzvah. Why are you more happy? And he's saying, I'm more happy because it's something deeper and greater. So here too, he's saying not only Mizmor, but Mizmor Shir. In other words, there's a much greater dosage of Simcha.
Because it's the Beis HaMikdash.
Yeah, which is rooted in a place that's beyond us, as he will explain. V'zeh, and this is the meaning of another pasuk. And here we come to the Megillah of Rus. The end of the book of Rus, which is also read, of course, on Shavuos, or learned on Shavuos, and even those don't who read it in the Tikkun al Shavuos, they say Megillah Rus. And the connection of Rus, the story of Rus, we all know, is the story of ultimately the great-grandmother of David HaMelech, because Rus, who was a Moabite woman, who comes from the genealogy of Lot, because Lot as we mentioned in an earlier Shir, had relations with his two daughters, and one son that was born was named Ammon, and one son that was born was named Moav, right, which means Me'av, from the father, as Chazal point out. And Moav ultimately fathers a dynasty, which settles in a country called Moav as well. And Rus will be one of those women who come from that genealogy of Moav, meaning her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is Lot, and Lot's daughter is her great-great-grandmother. Rus marries a Jewish man. The pasuk in Rus tells us a story how a man named Elimelech, who came from a very distinguished dynasty and ultimately traced his roots to the tribe of Yehuda, which was the tribe of royalty, which would become the tribe of David HaMelech later, at a later point in history. Elimelech leaves the region of Eretz Yisrael where he lived, Beis Lechem, and he moves out to Moav, and his two sons, Machloin and Kilyoin, marry two Moabite women, Rus and Arpa. And the story of Rus takes us from that point, because Elimelech passed away and the two boys passed away, and Rus and Arpa are two widows, with a third survivor, Naomi, the wife of Elimelech, the mother-in-law of these two daughters-in-law. Arpa, she tells Arpa, go home. You have nothing to be here. Unfortunately, your husband died. Why don't you just go back to your roots and rebuild your life, which Arpa does. And Rus, who she also beseeches to return back to her roots, refuses to go back to Moav, and she says, no, I'm going to remain here with you, in the famous words that we also spoke about a few days ago about a convert, that she says, I'm going to be with you, Basher Telchi Elech, Ubasher Talini Olin, Amech Ami, Elekayech Elekai, Basher Tamusi Amos, where you die, I die, where you go, I go, where you dwell, I dwell, your people is my people, your God is my God. It says, Virus Dafkaba. Vatishak Arpa Lachamaisa, Virus Dafkaba. Arpa kissed her mother-in-law, but Rus cleaved to her. And then the rest of the story is how they come back to Eretz Yisrael, and now Naomi has to worry, of course, about a shidduch for Rus. And what happens after a long and surprising evolution of events, who does Rus marry? Rus actually marries a relative of her first husband, of her deceased husband, a relative of Elimelech, her father-in-law, a man named Boaz. Boaz, as we know, is a great-great-grandson of Peretz, who is one of the twins that Tamar gave birth to when Yehuda was with her. I assume you know the story of Yehuda and Tamar. So Yehuda and Tamar, when they were together, Tamar has twins, Peretz and Zarach, and Peretz will ultimately become a father as well, and his great-great-grandson is Boaz. So Boaz marries Rus. They have a baby named Oved. Oved is the father of Yishai. Yishai is the father of David. So David's grandfather was Oved, David's great-grandfather was Boaz, and David's great-grandmother was Rus. Now, this is not just for the story of Rus, which is good to know, but it's also relevant to the discussion that's going to come soon. So when the pasuk in Rus describes the marriage of Rus and Boaz, so the people bless her, and they say to Boaz, this is Rus chapter 4, Yitin Hashem es isha bal beisecha ki Rachel ucheleya shabanu shteyem es beis Yisrael. May God give that the woman that you're bringing into your house should be like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel. V'aseichayil be'efraso krosh shem beveis lechem v'yihi beischa kebeis Peretz. Your home should be like the home of Peretz, asher yolda Tamar li Yehuda. Peretz is one of the boys who Tamar gave birth from Yehuda with the father. Min hazera sheyitin Hashem lechem benanara is from the children, from the seed that Hashem gives you from this young woman, from this woman Rus. The home should be like the house of Peretz. And Boaz marries Rus, and she has a son, and the son's name is Oved, who becomes the father of Yishai. And the way Rus concludes is with the genealogy. It starts with Yehuda and Tamar. The child is Peretz, So Peretz is the child of Yehuda, and Peretz is the father of a boy named Chetzron. Chetzron is the father of a boy named Ram. Ram is the father of Aminadav, who is the father of Nachshon, the famous Nachshon ben Aminadav. Nachshon is the father of Salma, and Salma is the father of Boaz. So that's how it goes. Boaz, Salma, all the way up. Aminadav, Nachshon, Aminadav, Ram, Chetzron, and Peretz. And then, as we said, Boaz is Ovid and Yishai and David. Yishai Holed is David. That's how Rus ends. Yishai Holed is David. So he says, V'zeu v'hi beischa kebeis Peretz. This is the deeper meaning when they bless Boaz. Your home should be like the house of Peretz. Asher kina hailedes havlad lebchinas bayis. Really, they're blessing that you should have a child. They say clearly. But they're saying that hailedes havlad, the way they're describing the birth of a child, is not just you should be a child from this marriage. There should be a home. V'hi beischa. Kino hailedes havlad lebchinas bayis. The way they're describing the euphemism, the kinui, for the birth of the child is a home. What's the meaning of this? Ki bane lav b'schusa talya milsa, ella b'mazala. Because when it comes to children, doesn't depend on schus, it depends on mazal. I'm going to read a few lines here, and then we'll explain. Schus, hu b'chines is pashtus yutzvidas datzilis. When you say schus, it represents the expansion, the expression of the 10 divine qualities of Atzilus, Shebebchines Pnimi, which represent an that is internalized. Haskala, it starts off with Seichel, and there's always Seichel is Schus Chuli. There's a Seichel, there's a mindset that gravitates to merit, and he doesn't want to finish. There's a mindset that gravitates L'chayv. Schus is merit, and Chayv is guilty. Chuli. Over there begins the concept of schus. Aval bani, children, sharshim l'mayla min ha-seichel. They're rooted in a place beyond seichel. Ubchines mazala. This is what we call mazal, shehu bchines makif ha'elyon, which is the highest makif. Why is it called mazal? Ki pirish mazla, the word mazal, hainu hamakar shehu ha-mashpia umezil, liyos yazel mayim. Midalya in Bilam's poetry in Parshas Bolak, Yazel Mayim, let the water flow. Noizle means when water trickles, when water falls, when water flows, it's called noizel, it flows. Mazal in Hebrew is the source. Mazal is the mafil, that which causes the flow. Liyas Yazel Mayim. Or another pasuk, V'noizlim min Levonain, it flows from Lebanon. That's why children are called bayis, because it's rooted not in schus but in mazel, makif elyon.
Is this the Nukvim that you mentioned on Shabbat?
No. That's what we say in Sheva Brachas. When you get married, what's the definition of marriage? Asher yatzer es adam b'tzalmai b'tzalam mustav nisoy v'hiskin loy mimenu binyan adayat. V'hiskin loy mimenu. He built from Adam a binyan, a structure, an edifice that is eternal. Again, binyan adayat, a binyan. Now this is very, very brief and compact. There's a lot here. So let's try to decipher it. Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach. This begins with a Gemara Masechta Moed Katan that the Balatanya assumes the reader or the learner knows, like all the Psukim and Maimar Chazal and Bavli or Shalmi, Kabbalah, etc. But I brought a Gemara so we could actually see it inside. The end of Moed Katan, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph. It's quite a loaded piece of Gemara, and all the Mefarshim, talk about this. Rashi, Tosfos, other Rishonim. Amar Rava said, Chaye Bonne Umezoyne. Lav b'schus Talya milsa, ela b'mazal Talya milsa. Rava said, when it comes to chaye is life. How long a person is going to live, a person's health, etc. Bonne, a person's children. Everything connected to their children. How many children, the nature of the child, the quality of the child, the experience with the child. And the third thing is mezayna, parnasa, sustenance. As the Ritva says, basically you got everything here. Chaye bano mezayna, he says, all the blessings in the world are either connected to children, family, or it's connected to health and life, or it's connected to parnasa, to livelihood. I mean, one of the two. When you say life, it's not just a person is alive, it's health. So that's physical health, and of course emotional health, and mental health, etc., etc. The Ritva says this is basically all the tovas shabayla. So Rabbi says these three things, but this is says Chaye bano mezayna, lav b'schus talya milsa, moed katan chaf ches amud aleph 28a. These are big words. It does not depend on a person's schus, on a person's merit. Ella b'mazla talya milsa. It depends on mazel. Now, the way you read it literally is nothing to do. You're a good guy. You're not a good guy. You have merits. It's called mazel. That's how you read it. Mazal talya milsa. It's a mazel thing. This one has this child, so there's this child, so there's this parnos. Lav b'schus talya is mazal talya milsa. Now, right away when you read this, it's like, so why does the Torah talk about, reward for this week's Parsha? In Bechukosai telechu, v'nasati gishmeichem be'itam, I mean, schar of mitzvahs and so forth. How are we to reconcile? He's like saying, nothing to do. It just has to do with mazel. Yeah. Now, what does really mazel even mean? What does the word mazel, in the human vocabulary, mazel just means like, there's a lot of, it's a jackpot. Guy has mazel, the guy has luck. What does that mean? Is that a real thing? Is Rav saying it's all random? Rav is not saying it's all random. He's saying b'mazal talyamis. And then Rav illustrates. He says, and I'll tell you how I know. Or he doesn't say this is how I know, but he says, I'm going to show it to you. He says there were two people, his teachers, he knew them, Rabbi and Reb Chizda. Travayu Rabban and Tzaddik Havi. So I can tell you about both of them. They were sages and they were tzaddikim. When there was famine, Rabbi davened for rain and it rained. Reb Chizda davened for rain and it rained. Reb Chizda lives 92 years and Rabbi lives 40 years. So Rabbi says, why? Why? What's the fairness? He gets to live 92 years, he gets to live 40 years. It was no chus, they're both tzaddik. It's mazal talya milsa. It's a different calculation. It says Reb Chizda observed 60 marriage festivities in his family. 60 marriage festivities. Shishim be'ilula he observed. Of children and grandchildren and all that. 60 marriages. 92 years. 92 years. So. And he said that Rabbi throughout his lifetime experienced 60 events of grief. 60 events of mourning, Rabbi in his life. He says, Reb Chizda, they used to serve the most expensive bread, from fine flour even to the dogs. That's how much richness there was. Even the dogs had the greatest delicacies. And the dogs didn't even eat up the bread. That's how much abundance there was. The dogs shouldn't finish a meal. That's a chiddush. And Rabbi, even barley bread, which was considered a cheap bread, animal fodder at the time, they also couldn't find enough. That was Rabbi's house. So he says, if you looked at both of them, tzaddikim. If you look at schus and you want to say, oh, he did this, he did that, Rabbi said, you're barking up the wrong tree. Now, this in itself is a very powerful idea. Sometimes people look, must have been us. Like Rabbi says, you really do not have this life figured out. If you think you understand why this person is experiencing this in life and this person, lav b'schus talya milsa, ela b'masal talya milsa. I mean, Rabbi said this. That the calculations that people naturally give, moral calculations with chusim, he says, it's completely, you're completely off the mark. And then Rabbi says about himself, there were 3 things that I asked from heaven. I wanted. 2 they gave me, and number 3 they didn't give me. I asked for the wisdom of Reb Huna and the wealth of Reb Chizda. We spoke about Reb Chizda's wealth. And I also asked for the humility of Rabbi, the son of Reb Huna. He says, the first 2 they gave me. They gave me the wisdom of Reb Huna and the wealth of Reb Chizda. But the humility of Rabbi Reb Huna, that I couldn't get. Quite interesting, huh? He said, that I never got. I couldn't get that humility. He wanted it, but he couldn't get it.
Maybe that would have been his own work.
Maybe it's in Bar Chaim Zayin. Chaim Bar Zayin.
Yeah, that's what he says. That's what he says.
You have to forget to get that.
What about Ein Mazal Yisrael? That's the question.
You have to forget to get that.
But that's what Rava says. And then the Gemara goes off to a continuous sugya about these concepts. This is what the Baal Tanya is quoting here when he says, Bonna lav b'schus Talia Milsa, l'mazal Talia Milsa. He's quoting Rava from the Gemara Moed Katan Daf Chav Ches Amar Aleph, almost at the end of Moed Katan. Or Mamash at the end, yeah. One page before the end. Now, before we get into what the Maimer is saying, because he's saying something very intense here, to put it mildly, let's just do with the traditional, what they explain the Bush, to get the full picture of it. So the Mefarshim struggle with this. Does Rava really mean that a person's behavior will never impact his life? Nothing. So a person say, I want to give tzedakah, I want to learn more, etc., etc. Does Rava really say that? It would be very hard to think that Rava actually says that. Then there's the famous Gemara. There's a machlokes in Masechta Shabbos, a very famous machlokes, Reb Chanina and Reb Yochanan. Reb Chanina says, Yesh Mazal Yisrael, and Reb Yochanan says, Ein Mazal Yisrael. In other words, the concept of Mazal, Ein Mazal, is Rava arguing with Reb Yochanan and saying there's absolutely a Mazal. Not only is it absolutely a Mazal, the most important things are based on the Mazal. Is he Pashut arguing with that? Or he agrees with them? What does the word even Mazal mean? So Rashi discusses this, and Tosfos discusses this, and other Rishonim discuss this. I would say that even though there's variations in this one, but the consensus is as follows. That the concept of Mazal, there's also a famous essay by Rav Eliyahu Dessler. Rav Dessler, the famous Monsey, has a Svar Michtav Eliyahu. I think in one of the volumes over there, volume 4, one of the later volumes, he has a long discussion on this Gemara. What does the word Mazal mean? Generally, Mazal has to do with the constellations. The constellations, what we call the zodiac. The way the Rambam describes in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh is that already thousands of years ago, the astronomers who started to map out the sky noticed that in the perceived orbit of the sun around the earth, there is a backdrop that one can perceive in different months of the year, a backdrop of stars. The month of Nisan, April, is associated with the zodiac that we call Tle, which is the sheep. The month of May, Iyar, is associated with a zodiac called Shir. Arius and Taurus, a bull. Sivan, June, is associated with Gemini, twins. It was shapes of the stars that had different images, and it goes through all the 12. Yeah. This is completely irrelevant to the question of the Earth orbiting around the moon, or the sun, the Earth orbiting around the sun, or the sun orbiting around the Earth. No matter what, however you want to define it, it's completely irrelevant to that discussion. As this orbit happens, every month, behind the backdrop of the sun, we can't see by day the stars. But if you would be able to see by day the stars, and by night you do, you'd notice that the sun is so to speak, orbiting in front of this backdrop of stars that have this image, which they saw in a tremendous significance. Yeah, even though it's a little different because of the amount of years, but it's still
So it's not a 6-month rotation back and forth.
12. Tle, Shar, Tu'umim, Sartan, Aryeh, Psula, Moznayim, Akrov, Keshes, Gdi, Dli, Dogim. Those are the names in Hebrew for the Mazalas.
Say spring and fall is back and forth.
Yeah.
Only for
Northern Hemisphere. They saw in a tremendous significance. Yeah. Known as astrology, Chachmas HaKechavim. Then there's another inyan, and that has to do with the hours of the day. They also associated with different mazalas. So therefore, when a person was there, which day you were born, which month you were born, which hour you were born. Yeah. And that's associated with a certain star, with a certain constellation, with a certain shape. That's how they used to teach Mazalis. Mazalis were those constellations of stars. So Reb Chanina said, Yesh Mazal Yisrael. These Mazalis affect the Jewish people. People's natures, people's dispositions, people's experiences in life. Rabbi Yochanan says, Nah, ein Mazal Yisrael. All these Mazalis have nothing on the Jewish people. Comes Rava here and says that Bana Chayim Mizayna, don't think it has to do with your schusim. It has to do with your Mazal. And he proves it from Rabbi and Reb Chizda, and then he speaks about what he asked for. But here there's something strange. If you really believe that Bana Chayim Mizayna is all Mazal, why are you asking for it? Why are you asking for wisdom? Why are you asking for wealth? Wealth has to do with Chayim, with Mizayna. So you are asking for it. So it's not Mamash Mazal. So that means you could believe that, you could think that there could be change. There could be change.
What's the regular understanding of Mazal is? It's the logic. There's a connection between the constellation of the stars.
What's the connection? Well, I don't know how to answer that question.
Is it logic? Is it science? Is it...
I wouldn't call it science. He's like, why would anybody associate the constellation of the stars with a person's mazel here on the world? What's the relationship?
I saw over the generations that certain people, born under certain constellations had certain
Patterns.
strengths in their libidos.
It's not hard science, but they were identifying as certain people's dispositions, characters, weaknesses, strengths, etc. So they tried to make these connections. So it's very, very elaborate and detailed. And the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Nun Vav, goes through a whole thing. If you're born on Sunday, you're this, and if you're born on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, this hour, that hour. It's like a whole Maisa. Okay. So the way it's understood generally is that it's not a random thing of luck. Rather, it means that it's all by providence. I'm talking from a Jewish perspective. I'm not talking about secular astrology. It's by divine providence. What do we mean by divine providence? Every person, and this Rav Dessler explains, I think, at length in Michtav Meliyo, every person has a certain mission in this world. When you say Mazal, it doesn't mean stamps, like we say Mazal. You had Mazal. Mazal means that there's certain dimensions of a person's life that are based on the particular mission that this person has. Because it's based on a particular mission this person has, so therefore everything in their life is associated with that mission. So they have certain strengths, they have certain vices, certain gifts, certain challenges, in order to be able to do what you have to do in the world. So the Mazal really just represents the person's being born in that time and in that place. Just like you're born to a certain family and you're born in a certain period of history. You're also born in a certain month and in a certain day and in a certain hour and in a certain place. And it's all somehow connected to who you are in this world and to who you have to become in this world. And much of these things we don't choose because they're there, it's pre-making any choices. You don't choose who your mother is, and you don't choose where you're born, and you don't choose if you're born a male or a female. And that's why it's called Mazal. Mazal is basically the source of the flow. It's almost like you have a flow that's given to you. Like the Gemara says 40 days before the Vlad, the beginning of Sait, they announce Bas Ploini LePloini. Yeah. This daughter goes to all these types of things. The Gemara says in Niddah that a Malach Hamamuna La Tippa brings the sperm to God and says, this Tippa, this embryo, this fetus, should it be wise? Should it be foolish? Should it be strong? Should it be weak? Should it be rich? Should it be poor? All these types of things. It's basically like the trickle, the mazel, the flow that is designated for this particular soul, for this particular body. What is the flow that comes to you? And that's basically a person's life's experience and so forth. Now, where does tefillah come in? Where does Torah come in? Tshuva, Ma'asim Tovim. We say Rosh Hashanah, we scream, Shuva, Tzvila, Tzedakah, Mavir, Nisroya, Agzeira. So the Rishonim explained, the Rashi and Tosfos about Rava, that it's not pshat. Yeah, it's not pshat that Mazal is absolute. God is in charge of the Mazal. In other words, God chose it. And therefore, a person's behavior, a person's tefillah, a person's ma'asim tovim can sometimes change things, alter things, enhance it, make it this way, make it that way. So that's what they say. They say it even in Reb Chanina. When Reb Chanina says, Yesh Mazal Yisrael, he means there is Mazal, but it's not fixed and permanent and entrenched, and you remain a victim to it. The Mazal doesn't have its own independent reality, like we learned in the Maimah V'Yadaita. It's the axe in the hand of the chopper. The Garzin. So maybe, yes, the tool is this Mazal and the influence that this star represents, but it's all basically just, it's an axe in the hand of the chopper. The chopper is deciding it at every single moment, and therefore the Mazal is never fixed.
But that's what Mazal means, maybe.
Huh? There's a flow. Yeah, it's a flow. It's not just you're a victim to it and that's it.
What is the Mazal that's described as something that requires some great event to change it? There's
So that's why even those who say Yesh Mazal Yisrael, right? The pasuk says Tamim Tiyem Hashem Elokecha. Person is going to start living their whole lives by astrological signs and driving themselves crazy. It means they turn the astrology itself into an avodah zarah. The Mazal itself is like responsible for life's events, and that's completely antithetical to Judaism. However, if one embraces the view of Reb Chanina, Yesh Mazal Yisrael, and Masechta Shabbos Kufran Vav, the view of Rabbi Yochanan, Ein Mazal Yisrael. Yeah. There are even those who say, I'm looking here in the Haaretz, Rashi holds that Rabbi Yochanan, even Rabbi Yochanan who says Ein Mazal Yisrael, Rashi holds, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't mean there's no Mazal. He means that through tefillah and schus, Mishtane Mazal Shel Yehudi L'Toiva. You can change the Mazal. You can expand the Mazal. You can alter the Mazal. Comes Tosfos, and Tosfos says, don't think. Tosfos asks, how can Rav say B'Mazal Italia Milsa? Ha'amarim B'Soif Shabbos Ein Mazal Yisrael. Does Rava argue with Rabbi Yochanan? V'yashloimar the lepa'amim mishtana al yedei schus gadol. Rava knows that a schus can change. That's part Ein Mazal Yisrael. But generally, there's a certain Mazal. That's what Rava is telling us. That's how Tosfos learns the Gemara. Upa'amim she'ein mishtan, and sometimes it doesn't change. Sometimes it doesn't change. Rebbe Elazar ben Pedas was very, very poor, and he asked God, what's going on? And God says, for me to make you rich, the whole world has to be destroyed. So it's like somehow this is essential to the whole plan, to the whole process. He was a big tzaddik, sometimes it doesn't change. And that's Rava's point, that there were people who had great schusim, but something is about the Mazal. Okay, so this is generally how the Mefarshim deal with it. Rashi, Tosfos, a sugi in Shabbos, and a sugi here, Shabbos Kufn Vav Meid Katan Av Chavchas. The Balatanya is now bringing us to a deeper layer in this, so to understand what this really means. So what is Rava really telling us? What's the feeling? What's the conclusion of what we learned from Rava? Basically, Rava is a erlechayid, this tefillah. As Tosfos says, there's a schus, things could be changed. It's not etched in stone, immutable for eternity. Nothing will ever change. This is the Mazal a person has. Call it a bad or unfortunate Mazal, and that's it. It doesn't work that way. Even according to Rava, even if you say Yesh Mazal Yisrael. And Rabbi Yochanan also says Ein Mazal, at least according to Rashi, doesn't mean there's completely no Mazal. It means what? It means that it's not fixed. You don't have to be afraid of it. And Rava doesn't necessarily argue, but he's saying it doesn't always work. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it doesn't work. So what does this leave us with? A sense of optimism or pessimism? Excuse me, I just have a little cold. The words that we say, he has good mazel, he has bad mazel, that's already, that's just vocabulary. What does it really mean? What makes you have good mazel? You say, nothing. It's called fate. It's called, you won the lottery. So the Balatanya is saying here, gewaldige Wort. It's much deeper. Mazal refers to the makif lamakif. That's what Mazal refers to. It's back to the whole discussion we're talking about. L'mayla min adas, l'mayla min aratzin. It's not pshat Mazal is, Nebach, you fell into some trap. You were born, what do they say? They say sometimes on the news, a tree fell on a car. He was in the wrong time, in the wrong place. Okay, bad Mazal it's called. It's not so that Mazal is some random thing a person fell into. The Vart is, Mazal represents where I belong, that which is connected to my soul, but not necessarily in a conscious way, that is associated with my das. It's rooted in a place that is completely deeper than the I that I'm conscious of. It's rooted in the quintessence, which means in the core of the I. Not just Ratzin, but in a place that's deeper than Ratzin, not because it's less me, but because it's actually the core of me, that which I cannot process consciously. And that's the difference between schus and Mazal. Schus, you have a bezdin, they'll be mezaka or be mechayev. That's always a conscious process. There's a way of looking at something in a positive way. There's a way of looking at something in a different way. And the question is which prevails. Like, for example, you have a plaintiff, or you have somebody in court, a defendant, a plaintiff, and then the question is he zakai, is he innocent, or is he guilty? So there'll be a seichel l'schus, there'll be a seichel l'chiyuv. There'll be a judge who will say innocent, a judge will say guilty, and then they'll have to vote, achri rabim lahatos. Sometimes they'll have a debate internally, and some judges will convince the other ones, and the verdict will be perhaps unanimous or not unanimous, whatever the situation is. Schus, spiritually speaking now, that's how it is down here. Spiritually speaking, he says schus relates to the way the divine energy is processed through the spheres. And here there's chesed and there's gvura, and the chesed can prevail over the gvura. The chachma can prevail over the bina. This already begins the process where there is what we call conscious ishtalshalos. Mazal is that which is moizel. It's the source from where everything trickles down from. What is that? That's the makar, the ultimate source, which we call makif elyon, which is beyond seichel. In other words, I don't always have an explanation, not because it's not connected to me and it's random, because it's so deeply connected to me, it's connected to the I that is rooted in God's I that transcends any form of manifestation into any form of consciousness, even not a level of ratzon, which we call Sevav Kalaman, which is the lower level of Makif. That's what Mazal means. So Rav is teaching something very, very profound in life. You look at your children. Here he's talking about children. It's also true about other aspects of life. And so much of our children's lives could be somehow predictable. And that's what education is. Education means an art of communication. How do you educate? How do you mentor? And education has rules. Education is a sugya shlema. In halacha, in Torah, in nigla, in the world, lahavdil, education is a big sugya. Rules of education, models of education, how to deal with different types of children, how to understand your children. Great educators, great pedagogues require tremendous training and tremendous skills and tremendous sensitivity and understanding the souls of children, and most importantly, the diversity of children. What works for this child will be ineffective for this child. Maybe what is constructive for this child will be destructive for this child. One of our greatest challenges in the world of education is sometimes, one size fits all. Either you fit in or you don't fit in. This is the cookie cutter. You fit into the cookie cutter, you don't fit into the cookie cutter. And if you don't fit into the cookie cutter, oy vavoy. But we all know real education must always be chayis pnimi, Mazal. I have to feed you, I can't feed me. Feed you means I have to know your body. If I have to teach you Torah, I have to know your soul, I have to feed you. That's one dimension of children. Comes Rav and teaches us, but there's a dimension you have to understand that is not connected to schus. Not your schus and not anybody else's schus. It's connected to Mazal, the Italian Monsey. Vihi beischa ke beis peretz. And what is Mazal? Mazal has to do with that which is l'mayla min hadas, or l'mayla min haseichel. What does this mean in a person's life then? What does this mean in a person's life? It begins with marriage. Children come from marriage. How do you define marriage? V'hiskin loy mimenu binyan adayat. When they're talking about marriage, they keep on talking about building a home. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Rabbi Yossi said, I never called my wife wife. What did I call her? I called her my home. Why? What's wrong with calling your wife wife? Such a bad word. Beisoy zu ishtoi. When the Torah wants to describe the Kohen Gadol, it doesn't say v'chiper ba'adoy or ba'ad ishtoi. He atoned for him and for his wife. What's wrong? He said confession for himself. He sinned and his wife may have sinned. No. V'chiper ba'adoy or ba'ad beisoy. Says the Mishnah, beisoy zu ishtoi. And from here we know that a Kohen Gadol has to be married. Can't do that avodah Yom Kippur if you're not married. It's part of the qualities of marriage. It's part of the qualifications of the Kohen Gadol, I mean. It's not part of the qualifications of marriage. It's part of the qualifications of being a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Beisei ishtoi. What does this all bring us to? The same thing as in marriage. Yeah. A person, how do you get married? You choose, right? The machzbeten cup. Okay. Or hopefully, okay, I know in some places your parents choose. But if it's healthy, good, loving parents, what's their choice based on? What would be good for my daughter? What would be good for my son? Hopefully they'll be right. In many cases they're right. We know that it doesn't work in all situations. But that's not our discussion today. But the basis is you have to find a suitable partner. Which means personality, most important, values, midos, yerushamayim. You're looking for a person whom you could walk with and hold hands through the journeys of life, which are fluctuating. Life is a journey, it's a complex journey, it's an exciting journey, and you want that person. Yeah. As youngsters, when we choose, do we always know everything? We usually know very little. But hopefully, if you were in somewhat of a healthy place and a functional place and you know yourself, at least you got some of the basics right, or many of the basics right. Chas v'shalom, sometimes not. But the point is, a person anticipates. What are you functioning with when you're making this choice? You're functioning with your identity. What works for me, what I like, what I appreciate, what type of spouse do I want, what type of parent for my children do I want, what type of relationship do I want, what type of home do we want? These are the very important things. How do I feel about the other person? Is there a sense of attraction? Is there camaraderie? Can there be trust here? Is this the person you want to build your life with? There's no way that in dating, even if you date for a long time, you know everything about the other person. That's fictional, doesn't happen. Even if you marry 20 years, you barely start getting to know your spouse, right? Maybe after a half a century, you get to know a couple of things. I don't know, I'm not there yet. But we have to speak to those who are more experienced, how much you get to really understand. Huh? He's laughing. You say nothing. You're almost there. No. Still many surprises. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay. May there be many more surprises. Okay. So, and this is the normal thing. What am I going to decide with? Your mind. I have to decide with my mind. I remember I was dating my wife, so the shadchan calls me up and says, no. Time to make a decision. So it was an aunt of mine. So I said, if you want, you could marry her. Don't tell me to make a decision on my expense when I have to deal with it. If you want to make a decision, make a decision. You can't tell other people to make a decision. But they have to deal with it. It's not fair to put pressure on people. A person has to come to it. You have to realize that's all true. But there's another element. And that's the element of makif lamakif. There's an element in a choice that you can't choose. You're not going to choose consciously. And if you try to choose it consciously, it's going to be limited to your consciousness. But there's an element in the relationship that completely transcends your consciousness. Yeah, that's the Maimer, the Balatanya taught us. We learned last 2 years ago, I think, in Parshas Vayetze, right? Yaakov chooses Rachel. But who does he marry? He marries Leah. It's not a mistake. It's a mistake. Nebach. It's the story of life. It's the story of life. I choose Rachel. Rachel is Yefas Toya, Yefas Mara. Why shouldn't you choose Rachel? She's beautiful on every level. But who does Yaakov end up marrying? He marries Leah. What does this represent spiritually? That there's two elements in marriage. With the same woman I'm talking about. There's the element that I consciously chose. There's another element back to Shikha. I also chose, but how do I choose it? I choose it without knowing that I choose it. It's connected to Geidel. In fact, miyoideya, I can't know that I chose it. Because if I know that I'm choosing it, it's a choice that's limited and filtered through my limited das, which is not really who I am. It's just a finite aspect of who I am. Because what I know about me is never me. Because the core of the me is never what I know. Because what I know about me is the way my me is being processed consciously through my mind. How much of you is that, do you think? Not because of the Freudian idea of repression, that we really repress, and if you would just do enough therapy, you would really find out who you are. That's true in life, that there's a lot of things that I don't know because I'm not ready to know. Because I don't want to know. I once asked somebody for advice. He says, do you want me to tell you the truth, or do you want me to tell you what you want to hear? So usually most people, when you ask them this question, they say, of course I want to hear the truth. But try telling it to them, and you just created an enemy. I don't want to hear the truth. I want to hear what I want to hear. If I would want to hear the truth, sometimes you know the truth. I came for advice because I knew the truth, but I don't want to hear it. Maybe you'll tell me something else. So that's Pashut. If I'll be a little more open to myself and do some work, I'll find out who I am. That's true, but there's a deeper truth. That which is unconscious, not because I repressed it, because it's beyond consciousness. Pnimiyus HaKeser is not repressed. It's not repressed. It's beyond Ishtalshalus. The Gemara says in Megillah, Dav Gimel, Afal Gav de Iyuloi Chazi, Mazlei Chazi. The Gemara speaks there about Daniel, that people were trembling. They didn't see. It says he didn't see, his Mazal saw. What does that mean? Well, my Mazal saw? Well, I didn't see, my Mazal saw? So who's in therapy, me or my Mazal? So there's two parts of me now. So what do we believe in? Everybody is schizophrenic? It's a very deep concept. Afal gav de iulei chazer, mazlei chazer. Afal gav de iulei yada, mazlei yada means, on one level, I don't know that I saw it, but did I see it? I saw it in a way that is even deeper than if I would have seen it. And that's why I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it because, just like we all know in physical sight, for you to be able to see something, the wavelength, the frequency of the light has to be one that can be absorbed by your retina and interpreted by the brain in a particular way. There are certain things we can't see, not because they're not there, but because our kalim are limited. There are animals that see things we don't see. There are colors that we can't see, not because they're not there, because we don't have the vessels, the instruments, to be able to absorb it. But they're fully present.
You get the benefit of the Mazal, Yeshua Mazal, and you can't kill the man because he's got a Mazal. So he gets the benefit even if it's unconscious. It's easier to kill an animal because he doesn't have that.
The Gemara in Baba Kama. Adam Yeshle Mazala, you say.
That's the concept of I get the benefit of it even if I don't recognize.
Yeah. So marriage, marriage has three levels. There's a level of marriage, mazon, the food. That's one level. That's the level of marriage that you can digest, like you can actually eat it. I don't mean you should eat your spouse. I mean, you can eat the marriage. It's that which is me. It's my choice because it suits me like a hand in a glove. You know, you say, this couple, in vayagefen davar nomas couple. Perfect match. Like the Kalas like to say, he could finish my sentences. No, wow, you could mamish do each other's sentences. All women finish sentences, but is it the sentence that he actually wanted to say? Lav dafka. Then there's a level of marriage that has to do with ratzon, levush, soiviv. That's even a deeper level. That's the makif of marriage. Your desires are in the same place. Not your personalities, but your desires. In a way, it's less internalized, but it's more powerful. Because that's really the key. That's called soiviv kalalman. The soiviv of the house, the makif, what we call the garments, the blanket encompasses both of them. They're under the same blanket. They're under the same levush. And it's in halacha too. The Gemara says in Ksuvas, it's very deep how the halacha and the nister fit here. Hu bevigda vehi bevigda, yoitzi veyitin ksuva. If he insists to remain in his cloak and she insists to remain in her cloak, we know what it means physically. But spiritually, what does it mean? I will remain in my levush, in my makif, and you'll remain in your makif. It can't be a marriage. Yoitzi veyitin ksuva. There has to be one makif, which is what a chuppah is. A marriage is created through a chuppah, nisuyin. You need the makif. What's the makif? The makif is there's something that transcends both of you, but you're both committed to it. That's what keeps a marriage. That's what keeps a marriage's longevity. What's the issue with many secular marriages? What are they missing? They're missing love. They dated for 7 years, 6 years, 4 years. They claim there's a lot of love. So what happens? What happens is you get bored of people's personalities. There's disagreements. People change. Financial situations change. Psychology changes. Physique changes. Circumstances change. It's very tough. Life is tough. He wants this, she wants this. He wants to climb the corporate ladder. She wants to be domesticated. He's traveling. He wants to make money. She has her agendas. He wants There's so many disagreements that can happen. Other women can come into the picture. Other men can come into the picture. I don't have to elaborate. V'chuli, v'chuli, v'chuli. What was missing? They only had the mazal. The mazal means it worked for me. It worked for you. 5 years later, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for you. As people always say, I evolved or devolved sometimes. What's the makif? The makif is very deep. Makif means there's an overarching purpose, yeah. Or to put it in simple English, there's a commitment that is unwavering to the institution of marriage. That's what we call a commitment that's unwavering. Now, it doesn't always work. Unfortunately, there are situations, some of us know well, that different situations that even with great commitments, unfortunately, sometimes things don't work. But in many cases, the majority of cases, this is what secures it. Why? Food depletes after a few hours. The more makif, the less internal, but the more enduring. In a relationship too. There's a commitment to a certain plan, to certain values. In simple Jewish language, it's a commitment to the Ratzon Hashem. It sounds, for some people, very boring, religious, and archaic, but it's the stuff of a relationship. It's commitment to your children, to the value of family, to the value of marriage, to the holiness of a family. If you don't have that, if you don't believe that a family is a holy entity, that marriage is a holy entity, how much are you going to sacrifice for it? I can't blame a lot of people. They say, well, what do you want? Why should I be miserable? Like, it's not working. We're fighting all day. Let's just move out. Yeah, but there's kids. Fine, so the kids will have to figure it out. So I should be miserable for my kids. What does Judaism, and let them grow up, yeah. You know the old joke, right? A guy is 104 and his wife is 98 and they come to the Rav for a divorce. So he says, how long were you married? 89 years. 89 years, you're getting divorced? Yeah, we waited till the last of the kids died. Okay, very sensitive couple. Fine, it's a joke. But what's the point here? The point here is, when there is a very deep commitment to a makif, right, it will bring out a relationship that is deeper. It's not that you're supposed to stay miserable for the sake of your family. No. when the commitment to marriage is so deep, it allows you to find ways in which you're connected. Again, there are exceptions. I'm not talking about when there's abuse and there's sometimes terrible mental illness. I'm not talking about situations that are very, very unfortunate and sad. I'm not now discussing every marriage. You have to be very sensitive here. Every case is a case. But this is a concept, you understand, makif. It's not pnimi. But I'm not in the mood. So you're not in the mood. So what? So what? You're not in the mood. It's another good joke. A Yid comes to a Rav and he says, Ich will a get. I can't do it. Ich will a get. He's screaming. The Rav says, Wer will nicht? He's screaming. You and Columbus discovered America. You're the only one. I'm the only one. Fine. I'm glad that not all of you were laughing. In other words, some of you can't relate to this. Baruch Hashem. You're the romantic ones. It should always be that way. It should always be that way. Yeah. But that's all conscious makif. Ratzin is conscious. Simcha. There's something else. The binyan adeh. Okay, we'll continue Be'ezer Hashem tomorrow. I went beyond my limits here. I didn't forget your question about the Simcha. I didn't forget your question about the Avonim.
But in terms of Simcha, I say all the ideas were just so powerful. And Rabbi just spoke once about that terrific thing you gave about the 5 love languages in terms of marriage and the approach to Rebbe Shalom. This really lends itself to its own Shir in terms of marriage as makif, Mazal. It's just
the Mazal, the makif, and the makif l'makif. Yeah.
Something technical. But what you said about Simcha, and that Simcha doesn't come from the highest place, comes something which doesn't have Simcha. Simcha is, and therefore he needed to add by the bias comes from the highest place. More than, so I just wonder if he says anywhere that idea about Shabbos. I'm still working about the Rambans on Shabbos in the last couple of weeks by Iyar. That's why I mentioned it last week. In terms of Shabbos not intrinsically having Simcha, because its connection being someplace higher to Keser, to Atik Yomin, I don't know. I just wonder if he says that, if it comes out to any Mamarim he has.
He does, yeah. He does.
And that's why it doesn't have a natural Simcha, because
Yom Tov, it says a mitzvah of Simcha. Shabbos is not so pashut.
Yeah. So I'm curious if he has it as Mamarim on Shabbos.
Yeah, it's clearly. Yeah. The idea here is going to be not that there's no Simcha, that you have to discover the Simcha. In other words, naturally, it can be divorced from Simcha. But really, there's more Simcha. But it has to be discovered. In other words, it's not just a easy route. That's going to be the point.
It really comes back to it.
It's like the mi'odeya. You understand? Mi'odeyam leis kazos. There's deep simcha, but you have to discover it. It's not...
like you say, some of the stuff is...
You have to go through a transformation of paradigms. That's going to be the point. Sometimes to experience the simcha, you have to transform all your paradigms. You have to open yourself up to something that you were not ready to be open to. Because if you were ready to be open to it, it wouldn't have been that. So that's a whole different...
We were talking about the Mazal. I don't know about the Goydel.
Goydel, yeah. It's all connected, yeah. It's all connected.
It's the line by Yitzchak in Tolos, when we discovered Yitzchak, that's when we mentioned Daniel, the whole thing. We talked about the relationship of Yitzchak with Esav. We spoke with the same.
Also makif. That the makif of Esav was very holy, but not the pnimi.
That's when he brought the Mazal Goran.
How are you, Rabbi?
Welcome.
I'd like to introduce you to
Shalom Aleichem.
So
nice Joey
Thank
Greenberg,
you.
nice to meet you.
How are you? Welcome.
I spend a lot of time listening to you. It's a
So you know me, but I don't know you.
very well. I mean,
You do know him. He's the one who made this.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I know your work.
you understand?
So you're related.
He's my brother-in-law.
Gewaldig.
Could he explain
wanted
to you
to-
what it means, how to understand it? These are the 6 mitzvos to medios,
Yeah.
having to do with the heart by hand signals. There is one, no other, love, awe, and not to stray, the brackets on the side of the heart. And then the zechiros are 6 zechiros. These are, the Magen David is 3 mem. Mem.
Wow.
So Mamre Mitzias Mitzrayim and Miriam Tzvak Lashon Har Ba Moshe Rabbeinu, and then you have in the middle you have Amalek Sinai and Shabbos, Ayin Samach and Shin, and then you have the 13 Animamins.
Gewaldig. You live in Minnesota? Where do you live?
Yeah.
So you're visiting?
Yeah.
You want to send
Your brother-in-law speaks very highly of you. What is your profession?
I'm a doctor.
What field of medicine?
General. I work in a hospital. I started out in surgery, but I work in a hospital. I take care of patients that are on ventilators or traumatic brain injuries.
In St. Paul?
Exactly. You know Rabbi Feller?
Reb Moshe, yeah. And his son also.
Yep. Menachem Mendel.
Mendel, yeah. Gewaldig. You have a lot of hatzlacha. Okay, and I hear you have time to learn also. You have to learn also. Gewaldig. A lot of hatzlacha. Pleasure to meet you. Mazal? Super conscious. Let's call it super conscious. But you don't want to change it.
You actually want to work with the purpose that was given.
You go to Monsey also.
It's deep stuff.
I actually found the paradigm that explains to me better the union of it's what the relationship of knowledge and imagination. Knowledge is deep inside. It's a unimis. But imagination is makif. It's around. It's encompassing. That's why
It floats.
it floats. That's why Einstein was always saying the main thing is imagination.
Very good.
About imagination, well, it's makif. And also, makif, I found another paradigm that works for me. I don't know if it's true or not. When you have a bias, it's a minuchas nefesh. When you have minuchas nefesh, then you can do imagination. Without minuchas nefesh.
It's true. That's a good word. It's that the core is at ease.
Represent you can actually represent your own way.
The core is at ease.
Now you can listen to another side voice.
Very good. The bias is your core, and when you have a home that's at ease, there's a safety, there's a security, whether it's as a child or as a marriage or family.
Tears.
Then you can imagine,
Then you can imagine.
experience your knowledge. You can have the other two. Beautiful. I think that's powerful, yeah. Yes, yeah, thank you. Very good. Beautiful. Sometimes you got to split to come together.
It's together before.
Somebody said that sometimes it takes a divorce to come back to a real soulmate.
Sometimes too. Sometimes a divorce is the prerequisite. Unfortunately, but sometimes it's that way. Sometimes couples have to be close to a divorce to get back together. They have to be able to experience separateness in order to come back. You know what I mean? They have to be able to choose the relationship. Sometimes in some couples, they're like in it, but they're like stuck. When they could both feel not stuck and actually imagine life without the other, then they can choose. You know what I mean? It's a serious thing. Sometimes they have to be able to imagine life without the other, which is painful because it speaks about separation, but it allows them then to say, wow, so there is a me without the marriage. Do I want that me? And maybe I want the me of the marriage. So, but then it's a healthier choice because you're not stuck. And that's a blessing if you could do that without the actual separation.
Live on the edge.
Yeah, well, if a marriage is so forced, then you can never experience the bliss because you're just like stuck, and there's no other option. When the Torah legislates the options for divorce, it's for a reason. Even if a person doesn't get divorced, it's part of the equation that marriage has to be a choice. If you can terminate it, halachically, it means that you have to choose it, because you can also unchoose it. And that's part of marriage. If marriage is not by choice, it's not going to be a marriage. It's going to be a different type of relationship. The choice is part of what makes it a marriage. And an ongoing choice.
So marriage is an option.
Because they're...
Yeah. And the interesting is that biblically the option is on men, not on women. Rabbi Gershom changed it. So Rabbi Eliyahu Kitoiv, so men who don't understand Judaism think it's male chauvinistic. It's really the opposite. Men need the option traditionally more than women. Because women, it's easier for them emotionally. I'm not now mixing it with today's culture. the way it was. The Rabbeinu Gershom changed it for practical reasons. But the way Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov writes this in his book Ishu Beisai, men naturally are loners. They could be very easily loners, and they give up on marriage. Relationships don't come always natural to them. For women, it's much more natural. Their uterus is also prepared to have babies every month, so they're in a relationship always. The word rechem, womb, comes from the word racham, rachmanas, compassion. So when you tell a man, you can choose otherwise. If you want, you can get divorced today. You can give her a get. That allows him then to make a good choice, a healthy choice, a productive choice. The woman usually doesn't need that choice to choose the relationship. Men need that choice to be able to say, okay, is that what you want? Fine, get divorced. And you can consider it, and you can talk about it, and you can bring it up, and then you can decide. Tavla Mesav is for the woman. Mila Mesav Armalu, she wants to be together. Now, this doesn't mean, we're not talking about a case where the man is abusive and she can't handle it. Then the Bezdin will force him to give a get. That's called, we're talking now biblically. We're not talking about that. In other words, if it's a dangerous marriage or a crazy marriage, where the guy is not fulfilling his obligations, it's a different system. Then the Chazal will force him. The dysfunction that we have today with Gittin, right? People are blaming Judaism, but it's not really the fault of Judaism. The system of Judaism was a system that was supposed to work. We're just not implementing it based on our limitations and based on sociological pressures and based on corruption, that men get away with murder, especially if they give money to the Shul. They get away with murder. You understand what I'm saying? In an ideal system that follows...
Money to the Shul as opposed to the family.
No, the guy is torturing his wife 20 years, he doesn't give a get, but he's getting aliyahs, and he's a upstanding member in the community, and nobody utters a pips. That's a terrible travesty. That's a horrible travesty. That's the Aguna problem, right?
To save them and go to prison because of that. Or Walmart.
Yeah. I'm saying, my point is that that's biblically, in such a situation, they would force to give a get. But we're talking about a regular situation, the woman will work it out. And he needs the choice. That's why he has the choice. Rabbi Gershom changed it. He said that you can't just divorce a wife. She has to agree. Unless it's a real serious, she's abusive or he's abusive.
Before Rabbi Gershom,
you don't need your wife's agreement. You could just give her a get and move on. The question is why? And the answer is, Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov says, because the Torah understood, that by giving him that option, you already neutralize most of the problems. I think it's an interesting insight. Again, you have to understand the culture of the day. Today, it's a very different culture.
a pure culture.
No, I see some abusive situations, even then the woman.
If she's that's called battered woman syndrome. Battered woman syndrome. Right. So that's the idea. Rabbi Gershom said you can't divorce a woman without her consent. Just like you need the consent of the man, you equally need the consent of the woman. You can't just, why? Because he saw people who took halacha and they misconstrued it and manipulated it for their narcissistic benefits. They played games with it. Just like Hillel made a prusbul. Why? Halacha says you're not allowed to demand loans after sabbatical. All loans get canceled. In the ideal society, God wanted that every 7 years, everybody could restart. But he realized nobody's doing loans anymore. I'm not going to lend you money. I'm not going to lend you money, so it's over. So that's it. So people are not ready for that state of consciousness. So what do? He made a prusbul. You get the point? Because that's what the Torah wanted. You should cancel the loans the 7th year. If you have the money, the other person doesn't have the money, he can't pay you back. Cancel it, let him start over again.
It's interesting, on your credit rating, if you don't pay something, it only stays for 7 years.
7 years. Credit rating, maybe it's connected. But Hillel realized that we're not going to get anywhere. You're abusing the system. Rabbi Gershom saw People are just divorcing their wives because I don't want to get married anymore. I don't want to be married. I divorce her. Because they're in a place where they're manipulating the halacha. The halacha in Torah was written for a very ideal society of people who are working on themselves and people who want to do the best. And they need this option. But when it's being abused, you got to change it. So he said you have to have the woman's consent. If not, every guy wakes up, I want a divorce. No, she has to agree. If they both agree, fine. Again, if she's abusing him, or conversely, then the authorities have to come in. That's a whole different picture. But we're talking about if there's not that abuse. He wants to get divorced. She doesn't want. I don't care, we're getting divorced. Doesn't work that way. She has to agree. If it's a miserable marriage, fine, you can both get divorced. That was Rabbi Gershom's institution. But biblically, it's not that way. Marriage, you need her consent. Divorce, not. Why? Why does the Torah change? You can't marry a woman without her consent. But you can't divorce. You could divorce her without her consent before Rabbi Gershom. What's the logic? So this is a very interesting explanation. Marriage, you need her consent because she's getting married. It's not a relationship without her consent. If you're forcing her to get married, it's not a marriage. It's a slave. Right? But divorce is a whole different idea. It's not that you want to force her to get divorced. It's that the Torah felt that by giving him an option, he'll be able to choose marriage and he'll be good. He'll be able to work on the marriage because he'll feel the sense of separateness and independence to be able to choose it, which in 90% of cases, or in 100% she doesn't need. And again, if she does need, then you don't need his consent. Then Besdin will mix in. If she really needs a divorce because of abuse, right, then Besdin has to mix in. But in a case where it's not that, it's just work, she doesn't need the option of divorce. And it's a very interesting insight with women. Unless they're traumatized or mentally unstable, a woman often is very sensitive to what needs to be done to be worked on a marriage. I'm not talking about in extreme situations.
Basically, they manage the relationship.
They sense the value of relationships very deeply and instinctively. I know it's not politically correct to say this, but it's the truth. Women instinctively are more in tune with relationships. There's more empathy. You see how they deal with babies and with children. Today you're not allowed to say anything about men and women. There's no differences, but you all know it's true. You could compare how a mother takes care of her babies to how a father takes care of babies. I'm not making a generalization. Some mothers are irresponsible and some fathers are amazingly responsible. But generally speaking, the gift of empathy and connection and relationships is a feminine gift.
Was there more divorces before Rabbi Gershom? Was there some reason?
Listen, divorce in Judaism was always legislated. Unlike the Christians, who at a time prohibited divorce, in Judaism it was always permissible.
What prompted him to make that decision?
Because there were men who were manipulating the halacha. Just like today there are men who manipulate the halacha with divorce. They keep their wives suspended in limbo and uncertainty for 10, 15, 20 years. It's a travesty. Huh?
Why did he institute monogamy?
He instituted monogamy. Well, there's the whole story, but I think on a the principle behind it is that Rabbi Gershom, I think, saw again a very deep reality. That even one marriage will be hard to sustain, and having a few marriages is just
Yeah, but all that is provided in the Torah.
The Mormons, they the law.
The issue is this: men are compartmentalized creatures. Women are not.
We have everything in the box. We have many boxes here.
Yeah.
Men are compartments. It's a fact.
Just trying to associate it with something.
When a man goes on a business trip, in his own mind, I'm not going to say he's divorced, but every day a man goes to work, like he goes to work. Now I'm at work. His wife calls him, and he has to remember that he's married. You know what I mean? Women are always connected. They're never disconnected. They're not compartmentalized creatures. That's why halachically, biblically, a woman can't marry two men. Why not? He can marry two wives. Let her marry two men. It won't work. The woman's whole soul is connected to the man. It's not half and half. That's the biblical perspective. Rabbeinu Gershom's thought that in reality, it's not going to be sustainable.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.